Security in the Middle East is teetering. The Iranian-backed Houthis, seemingly unfazed by U.S. and U.K. air attacks on their assets, are vowing to continue to attack ships off Yemen's coast. Today, they struck a U.S.-owned container ship in the Gulf of Aden with a ballistic missile. The attack caused a fire on board the vessel, but the damage was limited and caused no injuries. Iran is accusing the U.S. of hypocrisy, arguing the U.S. can't stand with Israel and its war in Gaza, while simultaneously calling for other actors in the region to exercise restraint. Now, that war in Gaza has now hit the 100-day mark. Israeli forces continue to operate inside the enclave, and more than 24,000 Palestinians have been killed so far, according to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Authority, while at least 132 Israeli hostages remain in captivity in Gaza. Aaron David Miller is a senior fellow at Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and he previously served as a U.S. State Department official working on Middle East policy and the Arab-Israel peace process. David, Aaron Miller, it's good to see you again.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Sorry, I said that backwards. All right, we're now 100 days into this war. The death toll on the Palestinian side continues to mount. Israeli hostages remain held captive. What's your assessment of this war as it stands now?
I mean, I think the Israelis have three goals for themselves: to degrade or destroy, eradicate Hamas's military infrastructure above and below ground, kill its senior leaders, and free the remaining hostages. 20 of the 136, by the way, David, Israelis believe were either killed in the October 7th terror rampage, their bodies taken back into Gaza, or died in captivity. In fact, Hamas announced today that two Israelis, or the three videos they released yesterday, had died in Israeli airstrikes. The government of Israel, of course, is disputing that. Right now, I don't see any way out, largely because the goals of the two main combatants, Israel and Hamas, are mutually incompatible. The Israelis want to kill the senior leadership and prevent another October 7th. Hamas has vowed that there will be repeated October 7th. And Hamas's objective, I think, is to survive, to essentially be able to launch rockets the day after, or the day before, before any putative ceasefire agreement was reached. So right now, I see no end to this. The suffering part of the Palestinian people is incalculable. The humanitarian catastrophe is not only looming, it's there. They're using the F word in terms of famine, malnutrition, diseases spreading, the absence of basic necessities. It's a parade of horrors.
I wonder, sir, there are reports of tension in Israel's war cabinet about how aggressive the military approach should be from now on to defeat Hamas, but also to release the hostages. We've seen some reporting in the major Israeli papers. What do you make of where the Israeli war cabinet is reportedly at, where they're at right now?
First of all, you got two governments in Israel. You have the old government, the most extremist in Israel's history, presided over by Benjamin Netanyahu, and you have the war cabinet, which brings Benny Gantz and his national party into the cabinet, which gives Netanyahu an added buffer. You need 61 seats in order to govern, 61 seats in the Israeli Knesset or parliament. I think Benny Gantz and others are much more interested and more focused on some sort of negotiation that would bring the hostages home. I'm far more focused on Mr. Netanyahu, who I think has conflated his own personal and political and legal travails. Remember, he's on trial for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in a Jerusalem district court. He's due to testify, I believe, next month. That trial is now 3 years old. Mr. Netanyahu needs to stay in power in order to beat his indictment, water it down, or obviate it completely. So in many respects, a long war is something I think that he certainly wouldn't shy away from. And that's part of the problem on the Israeli side. It's just there's no mechanism right now to remove the Israeli prime minister, and the public is more or less unified because the blood is up because of what happened on October 7th, more or less unified behind the current government, the war cabinet, that is.
So you said earlier, no, you see no way out. But there are these negotiations, and there's reporting that suggests that Hamas and Israel are very far apart on any new deal. Hamas wants to use any deal to end all the fighting in Gaza, which we've talked about the tensions in the war cabinet there. Israel at this point, or what we're told, is only interested in sort of a renewal of the hostage release sort of program we saw earlier in this conflict. Do you think we could see something like that anytime soon, renewed on this?
Hard to imagine right now anything more than a humanitarian pause. There was one for a week, as you recall, last month, which ended up trading 100 Palestinians for 30 or 40. Well, actually, there were 100 plus Israeli hostages ultimately released during that week period, and many more Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. I think you could see another humanitarian pause. There are reports that Hamas has agreed to provide medical treatment or medicines to those Israelis who are now in their 100th day of captivity. I'm not sure you're going to get any more than that. In large part, as I've argued before, I just think the goals of the current Israeli government and the senior Hamas leadership ensconced in tunnels somewhere in southern Gaza are simply incompatible right now.
So where does this go then next? Does it, because Israel has said it's going to scale back sort of the intensity of its military operations in Gaza as reservists need to be released back into civilian life for various reasons, and also there's this pressure to reduce the civilian toll. Do we just get a lower grade continuation of the same thing where deaths on both sides keep piling up but at a slower rate?
I mean, under the best of circumstances, right now, over the next month or so, you could see a significant downscaling of the more kinetic, intensive ground campaign the Israelis are waging, less emphasis on artillery and airstrikes, which are doing irreparable harm, not willfully or intentionally, but I think the Israeli rules of engagement have clearly been broadened considerably. You could see that and a surge, because that's what's needed, of humanitarian assistance into Gaza, because you get a reduced level of fighting, reduced level of Palestinian deaths and casualties, which would allow UN and other non-government organizational aid workers in, and perhaps another trade for an extended period of time for the remaining civilians, the 40 or so women and non-Israeli Defense Forces males, in exchange, again, for an asymmetrical trade, probably 3 or 4 times the number of Palestinian prisoners released in exchange for 40 Israeli hostages. That's the best, frankly, that I could foresee, let's say by the end of February. But let's be clear, the Israelis will be operating in Gaza at some level, probably for months to come. And I think we have to reduce our expectations and understand that 2024 is going to be the year of Gaza. Hopefully, you can see a surge of humanitarian assistance. I just can't get my mind around how you maneuver through all of this with the Israelis still trying to eliminate the Hamas leadership and destroy its military capacity, and how you deal with the 136 hostages, both dead or alive, that are still being held by Hamas 100 days, 101 days now into this conflict. It's something that's impossible, frankly, David, to predict.
I want to thank you for your time, sir. Aaron David Miller. I screwed that up earlier and said it backwards. I apologize for that.
Happy New Year.
You too, sir. Thanks so much. That's Aaron David Miller, Senior Fellow at Carnegie Endowment for International Peace.